Good day and welcome to the December 15th edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Short News. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. Today I want to talk about Patreon, Sargon on the COD, and crypto. I haven't talked about crypto very much this year, or at least in the last few months, because there hasn't really been very much to talk about. Geopolitics, domestic politics, far more important. Market tells you what you should talk about. And but I've been quietly watching the situation in crypto, and I still believe in it, and I'll tell you why. Because today, I want to talk about the unplatforming of Sargon of Akkad, which I haven't spoken about publicly. Been talking about it privately amongst friends and family since it occurred. But the situation with Sargon getting pulled down from Patreon. Now, before we go too far here, let's remind ourselves that a lot of the unpersoning, and it looks like what happened to Sargon up front, was that he, ticked off the wrong people, and they now have this. They have the ability to use these companies' systems to game those systems to create complaints, which then can get the person unplatformed. Right? It's happened. This is nothing new, right? In Sargon's case, he went after the right wing SJWs, and then they went after him on Patreon. And Patreon responded. Now, so the initial thing I don't really have much of an issue with. I mean, I do, but I don't. I understand the company's policy and everything else. What I have a problem with is Patreon not seeing the situation for what it was and reinstating Sargon, because we're talking about someone who's bringing down something like $11K a month. This is not an this is not an unsubstantial amount of money for Patreon, because Patreon gets 5% of the revenue. They're very upfront about it. So, this is good money for them. The problem here is that Patreon and Facebook and Twitter and everything else, these are all symptoms of a bigger issue. Much, much bigger problem. Because it's been clear to me that since going back to the attacks on the banks over the Second Amendment, that really what this is about is destroying businesses and destroying people's ability to make a living if you don't believe in certain political ideals. So Subscribestar is not a solution, because within 5 minutes of everybody moving over from Patreon over to Subscribestar and PayPal 86th their relationship with Subscribestar. Now, all of this stuff is insane breach of contract law, right? Contracts are two-way streets, and unilaterally abrogating a contract based on nebulous terms of service is not good. It's not even just that it's not good business. It's just not even. It's an abrogation of contract law, honestly. And the real solution today is to sue. And if I were Sargon, that's probably what I would have done. I'd have sued Patreon immediately. I'd taken them to court and spent 1 month's salary, 1 month's wages, and taking them to court. They're not that big a company, and that's something that needs to be done. And we need to fight that now. We need to start setting some law precedent. We need to start putting these people on their back foot, as opposed to just rolling over and moving somewhere else. Because the truth of the matter is that what they're really trying to do is they're trying to kill the payment challenge. And it was interesting that Jordan Peterson wrote a Patreon post about what he thinks of the situation and what he's looking at doing. He and Dave Rubin and Sargon and some others thinking about what they can do in terms of solution. It was interesting. I saw on Twitter right after that, Andrew Torba of Gab came back to Dr. Peterson and said, "Look, Dr. Peterson, we have a Patreon substitute all up and ready to go, but we can't get a bank to underwrite any of it. And you won't find a bank that will. And that's the real problem. They've got the banks locked down. They're trying to, it's not just that they don't want your voice heard. They don't want you making a living if you hold the wrong political ideas." Now, we are dangerously close to a very ugly scenario. We're dangerously close to the worst kind of Orwellian panopticon. We're approaching, Black Mirror kind of technology issues now. It doesn't matter whether you like what people have to say, or you don't like what people have to say. Free speech is about defending Nazis' right to be Nazis, because they do have a right to be a Nazi. They don't have a right to, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have a right to make a business based on that Nazi, right? They don't have a right to, no, they do. They have a right to make a business being a Nazi if there are other people who are willing to engage with them. It is not the platform's position, or it's not even right for the platform to say, I don't want you to be my customer. You hold these views. Now, sounds a little unlibertarian for my, but it's not the case. The true matter is that there's government pressure and from above keeping people from opening a bank or being a bank that's willing to engage and be the bankers of Nazis. That's the problem at this point. And we're not even like dealing with Nazis at this point. We're dealing with Sargon of Akkad, who's the opposite of a Nazi. Right? So none of this is even remotely reasonable. So fighting in the courts is one of the things that needs to be done. Gab, being who they are, purposefully picking fights in order to highlight this problem. And you have to understand that Gab is doing yeoman's work on this. So the solution is not going to present itself. A stable solution is not going to present itself through the current banking system. Remember, the banking system is, the banks are all chartered by the states and or the federal government. You do realize that, right? They are government institutions. They are not private corporations. They are a specific type of corporation that was sanctioned by the government, and they are chartered, they are under state charter, and then they are regulated completely at every level. Meaning they don't really have open control over as to who they can or cannot have as customers. That's pretty obvious. So what's the solution, right? This is all just a rant at this point. Is okay, so here are the problems. So then what's the solution? Well, the obvious solution is crypto. The obvious first order solution here is to de-dollarize your life as much as possible, or at least unbank as much as possible. This is why they want a war on cash. This is why they don't want you having a cash-based economy, right? Why they want cash removed from the system, because they understand that if you if people are still allowed to trade in cash, then they can't control who can make a living or not. Now they always couch all this in terms of trying to fight terrorism and trying to fight money laundering and knowing your customers and all this stuff. And it's all these are all problems created by governments fighting amongst themselves, and now we have to pay for it by not being able to use cash and have any kind of financial privacy. They don't want any financial privacy. They've got backdoors into every chip. The NSA has backdoors in every chip made by Intel, ARM, an ARM licensee, or AMD. I mean, they can read everything. So what's the solution to all this? Well, the solution to all this is, encryption that can't be broken directly by them. The solution is crypto. And the problem is that, who's taking crypto? Remember, at this, at the end of the day, if your electric company doesn't take crypto, then crypto is kind of useless as a payment method, right? But it is one way by which to start really thinking about creating a kind of lasting solution for content creators to get paid and to live their lives, because by getting paid, having to pay outrageous freaking fees, of course, to convert that money. But here's the gig. Patreon takes 5%, but then processing fees take at least another 7 to 8%. So on an average month, my patrons, $1 out of every $8 that my patrons pledge to me goes to Patreon and payment. If I were to take crypto directly, there's no real fee there. I can take any kind of cryptos. There's all sorts of cryptos out there that I can accept for less than 0.1%. And then if I have to pay somewhere between 6 and 10% to get that converted back into local currency, I'm still ahead by 3 to 4%. This is something we really need to start thinking about. It's like, what's it actually going to cost? I mean, if I were to accept Bitcoin right now and then having to go to Coinbase and pay, their 1.5% transaction fee to convert Bitcoins into dollars and then bring them down and have to pay capital gains tax on that, well, that's okay. This is what it is. I'm going to pay capital gain. I'm going to pay income tax on that money anyway. So the capital gain / income tax issue is not an issue. It's at the end of the day, it's still cheaper. It's only it winds up being what, 2%? 0.5% for the initial Bitcoin transaction, another 1.5% to convert back into dollars. That's still cheaper than any other, still cheaper than Patreon. And so we already have an incentivized use case for how to build a payment back channel that gets around the banks. Is it easy? No. Is it simple? No. But it's already incentivized and it's already there. It's something we really need to think about. Now, the other option is, of course, transacting, moving to a foreign bank. But as a U.S. citizen, that's really very difficult because FATCA makes it really, the FATCA laws make it really difficult for us to open up a foreign bank account. And then we still have to pay foreign exchange fees, convert in from crypto into euros or accept euros up front and then convert back and then have sent across. And, it winds up costing us a tremendous amount of money. But again, a service like Patreon that transacted in cryptos, even if they took 5%, we're going to save anywhere from 6 to 7% on the payment processing because, the crypto channel is going to be at most 2%. At most 2%. Coinbase is the worst, and they're 1.5% transaction. So do the math, and that's 2% for payment channel, back channel costs, as opposed to the current 8 to 10% for services like PayPal and Stripe and the rest of them. Something to think about. In this bear market, there's a whole lot of Bitcoins and various cryptos sitting on people's treasures and their ledgers. People don't know what to do with now because they're not really sure that they want to HODL at these prices. All right, this has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns short news for Saturday, December 15th, 2018. If you like what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. That would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate that. Also, click bell for notifications for when I do another video and or go live for my live streams, which happen at Monday nights at 8 and Friday nights at 8:30. You can follow my work over at TFL1728 on Twitter and over at my blog at tomluongo.me. tomluongo.me. You guys take care. You have a great weekend. Talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.